Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today with our final session of Girls STEAM Ahead for 2020. I'm Dr. Megan Federer with the Works, Ohio Center for History, Art, and Technology, and we are talking STEAM with some fantastic women from our community and from around the region. This program, like the others in our series, has been sponsored by some of our partners in STEM education, Facebook, the Heath Newark Licking County Portrait Authority, and Park National Bank. And I am really excited today to be joined by three women in a field that's near and dear to me, so in research and in education. So I'm excited about that. And just to introduce everyone here, joining us today are Drs. Heather Rhodes and Sarah Supp from Denison University, and Dr. Lynn Waterhouse from the Shed Aquarium. I know the Shed Aquarium isn't local, but she has local roots, and she'll be talking with us a little bit about her path. And I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to have an aquarium joining with us. Although I do want to promote, feel free to take that computer around and just walk in front of some of those animals and that you have, just to give us all something to see there. So we're going to start off with just some quick introductions to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, nice little short elevator talk here. And why don't we just go ahead and kick that off with Dr. Heather Rhodes. You're on my top left, so you get first dibs. And you are muted, Heather.
Thank you. Sorry. You've been doing this for so long, I should know to unmute, but I still forget. So I am really a neurobiologist by training. So that means I'm interested in studying the brain and the nervous system and the behavior of different organisms. I have always loved science and been interested in lots of different kinds of science over the years. And in college, my first semester, I missed orientation and I couldn't get any of the classes I want. And so I took a biological psychology class just because it had seats available in it. And I think that was a really serendipitous moment for me because that was the first time I really got to embrace and learn about the brain. And I was just fascinated. And so I just kept moving more and more in that direction. I took more classes. I found ways to get into research labs and learn as much as I could. Ended up getting my undergraduate degree in animal physiology and neuroscience, and then going on to graduate school in neuroscience. And now I'm at Denison, where I get to teach neuroscience, but I also get to teach really broad classes outside of that. So I teach classes that cover plants and fungi and animals and all kinds of different physiology, in addition to my specialty area, which is actually great because I love just talking and learning science. So including things that aren't my specialty. So that's what really makes Denison kind of my perfect job, is that I get to do very specialized stuff in my field, but I also get to just kind of enjoy the more general topics and get to talk to students about lots of different kinds of science.
What was great, Heather, is you just gave us our first lesson to take advantage of all the opportunities that are presented with yourself, right? So if you wouldn't have taken that biological psychology course, who knows where you would have been today. So it's a good thing everything else was closed. How about we go to next, Dr. Sarah Supp, also at Denison University, but in a different branch, different department. And just tell us, a little bit about yourself and what you do there.
Sure. Hi. I'm Sarah Supp. I work in the data analytics program at Denison University, though my background is also in biology, but a different part of it. I grew up on a farm in small town Nebraska. I didn't know anyone who was a scientist or anyone who was a college professor, so these are not things I ever really thought about when I was growing up. But I went to college and I tried a lot of different majors for 2 years. And I finally realized I was really missing my science classes. So I decided maybe that was a sign that I should do more science. So I got a biology degree, and then I went to graduate school to study ecology. This is like the environmental sciences, the study of the natural world. And I've done a lot of work in different aspects of ecology, studying how animals migrate, how they move around in space, how biodiversity is changing across the entire planet. And while I was doing that, I had to learn a lot about how to use computer programs in order to assess large databases, which as an undergrad, I didn't want to learn. I didn't care anything about. I discovered much later that it was actually really fun for me, and I got excited about it. And so, you know, fast forward, once I was done with my PhD and I did several years of research in ecology, I started looking at jobs that were more in data science and data analytics. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Denison, where I don't teach biology at all, at least not at the moment. I don't teach any ecology, but I do teach students how to do computer programming. I teach them basic statistics. I teach them how to think about and run long-term projects that go from start to finish to investigate questions in all sorts of different fields. So kind of like Heather, what I love about my job is that I get to do a lot of different things that I never imagined myself doing before. But I also am still a really active researcher. So I still do my ecology. I still study animal migration and global patterns of biodiversity and biodiversity change. So that kind of in a nutshell is where I am at.
Wonderful. So I'm noticing a little bit of a trend here that personally I'm a big fan of because I am a biology aficionado as well. So I know that we're going to continue that as we go into introducing our third panelist here, Dr. Lynn Waterhouse. And let's hear what you do at the Shedd Aquarium.
Great. Can I share? I just have some pictures for when I'm talking about these creatures.
I think so. Let's see if I can.
So unfortunately, Shedd Aquarium, we shut down yesterday. COVID is very bad here in Chicago, so I'm not at the aquarium right now. So I'm at home actually, so I can't take you on a tour behind the scenes.
All right, you should be able to go.
Yeah. So this is what Shedd Aquarium looks like. We're near a couple other museums inside. We have some fantastic habitat displays, including Caribbean Reef, which is near and dear to my heart because that's where I work. But one thing that a lot of people don't know about Shedd is we have a second location, which is this vessel. It's an 80-foot research vessel that's located out of Miami, Florida. And this is where I do my research from, down in the Bahamas when I'm in the field. And I work on this species in particular, Nassau grouper, which is a large fish. It's about 3 feet long as an adult. We have belugas here at Shedd. So compared to a beluga, the average size of a Nassau grouper is like the 7th the size of a beluga, for reference. So I just wanted to show you what a Nassau grouper looks like. They're also my favorite fish. So if we want to speak fish later. But I did high school and undergrad in Dayton, Ohio. So I am from Ohio. My brother still lives there. And I was a pure biology undergraduate, and I took a bunch of different classes, and I had some opportunities to do lab work. And I quickly realized that I really loved biology, but that sitting in a lab environment at a microscope was not for me. It's just not, I'm not good at fine work. It's not where my skill set lies. I'm not good at sitting still. And then I was fortunate enough to do some other experiences. There's these really great programs once you're in college called research experiences for undergrads funded by the National Science Foundation. They pay you in the summer, they pay you really well. You get to travel and do research. And I went up to Alaska and worked with ring seals, which are these adorable, cute little round seals. And we were tagging them to see where they move and how they behave on the ice relative to warming weather. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I also learned that the really important part of doing field biology is then being able to analyze your data once you have the data, and also figuring out how to properly collect that data rather than just going out there and just doing whatever you want in the outdoors. So I actually took a little bit of a detour and got a master's degree in statistics at Penn State, so still in the Midwest. And then I finished and got a PhD in biological oceanography, which is pretty much the same thing as marine biology. And now I work at Shedd Aquarium. So I'm a fisheries scientist. So my focus is for species that we consume as humans, or just important species out there, which all species are important as we view them. trying to make sure that if we're harvesting them for human consumption, that we're doing so at a sustainable level to ensure that that population exists in nature at the levels that it needs to still function, and also so future generations can enjoy that fish in the wild, and also if it's something we eat, to keep eating it.
I'm so excited because this is so much fun with the amount of overlap between your backgrounds. I have so many questions, and I feel like a kid in the candy shop that I get to talk biology and science with you all this session. So please, for any of our panelists, if there are things that you would like to talk about, and any of our attendees, feel free to drop questions in the chat box at any time. I will work those in as we go, and we'll make sure that we can address anything in there. But I'm so excited to hear more and dive into the conversations that you all just started with your passion for the background, for the work that you do, your research subjects, as well as the path you took and how students can learn from that. Lynn, you mentioned REU's research experience, undergraduates, and I saw some nodding from Heather and Sarah. I actually also, I'm familiar with that. I was an REU as well when I was an undergrad. I always like to joke that my REU experience probably wasn't as cute as yours, because I ended up doing REUs with little tiny spiders, but they did dance for me in front of TV because we were looking at courtship rituals and spiders. So it's always fun, the different things that you can experience and where you can go and what you can learn from that. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning, Heather. I hear that you grew up dreaming to be an astrologist or an astrophysicist, broad goals there. And what experiences maybe did you have even growing up before your serendipitous course experiences that really fostered that dream and made you kind of interested in those opportunities as they were presented?
So I think I lived in a science-friendly household. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a dentist. And so their backgrounds in sort of medical and scientific fields definitely influenced kind of, that we would go to the science museum and those kinds of things. We always had zoo memberships and did zoo camps. I actually, the first thing I remember wanting to be was that when I was a kid, there was this woman named Joan Embry who worked at the San Diego Zoo, and she would like go on all the TV programs, with like a cool baby cheetah or something. And the first thing I wanted to be was Joan Embry. So, that seemed like the world's best job, to like hold baby cheetahs on TV. And so, I grew up with those kinds of, we always had lots of pets too. And so I was very interested in animals, and that was kind of a gateway into biology. And then as I got older, I was a kid in the 80s when the space shuttle program was huge and new. And so I also got really fascinated for a while with space. That's where I wanted to be an astrophysicist, because I wanted to, study how rockets worked and how planets orbited. When I was in high school, I had pictures of planets all over my walls. And so that was really, I just, all these different kinds of science, all these kinds of how and why questions, and all of these, oh my gosh, can you even believe how big that is, how small that is, how cool that is, has always been a theme for me, and just how my brain worked and what I enjoyed. And I did, in fact, so in high school as a teenager, right, I was really set on physics and astrophysics and space. And then I took a really great biology. I had a really great high school biology teacher. I went to, honestly, a pretty mediocre public high school that was underfunded. And, we lived in like inland California. It was really hot, but our school had no air conditioning. Like, that's the kind of public school I was at. But we did have just a really great biology teacher who would make amazing work for us out of nothing. He had no budget at all, but we were doing really cool things in that class. And that, I think, turned me back toward biology a little bit again. So, going into college, I was interested in biology. I was interested in physics. I was interested in all this stuff. But then, like I said, I had that class on the brain. And the brain is just this amazing place where biology and physics and all of that, psychology, all comes together. And so I was like, well, this is for me. This is, this crux of all these things. And to this day, I still use concepts from physics regularly. I'm not doing astrophysics, but I incorporate those ideas. You can't, I always tell my students who take, like physiology kind of classes, and we always like, we're going to put the phys of physics into physiology. Because you do need to understand those fundamental principles. You need to know chemistry. You need to to study the brain. You've really got to pull together so many different areas of science. And that's part of what makes it fun. I'm always learning new things and incorporating new ideas.
That's actually really, a great segue into, I had a question for Sarah that relates to that, because Heather's mentioning pulling all of these pieces together and how it's not just working in one field. When you're a research scientist, you have your specialty area, you continue to work and grow and your knowledge in that sector, but you also are applying knowledge across different fields. And you mentioned in particular, you have an ecology background, but you really got interested in data analytics, and the coursework that you're teaching is really broad across almost any discipline even. So tell us a little bit, kind of a similar question to how we started with Heather, but in relation to how did you get, really interested in, statistics? Dive deeper into that maybe a little bit, like in statistics and application to the work that you're doing. What gets you excited to go and do your research and to work with students to help them understand how to approach that scientific process? Because I think that's a lot of what you were mentioning, is just approaching science and understanding science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can give it a try. It's not a direct path at all.
I'd like to hear though.
As I said, I always grew up, I grew up outdoors. I grew up on a farm. I had more animals around me than neighbors, but so I think that's some of my early interest and just curiosity. I've just always been a curious person. I'll admit I always liked school. So I always just liked learning a lot of different things. And I think that continued through college and through graduate school and to where I am now. I just like learning new things, and that's still true. So I get excited when I don't have a personal interest in economics, but I work with a lot of students who study data analytics as it relates to economics or to social sciences or to all sorts of different fields. And it's still really interesting to just hear and think through different problems of what they're doing. I think what the common thread is that I really like is I like being able to take things that seem very, very different on the surface. That might be economics and biology, or psychology and anthropology, or different things, and really boiling it down to the base elements of what that problem is that actually makes problem solving at its core similar across lots of different subsets. And I think that's true in my ecology research too. A lot of what I do falls into the realm of macroecology, which doesn't just mean macro as in large scale across the planet, but it means macro in the sense of often as ecologists or biologists, we're very interested in what makes everything unique. I'm interested in knowing across lots of unique things, what are the similar rules that they have to follow? And I think that's part of why I've fallen so nicely into data analytics, because to be able to do data analytics or data science and to be able to teach it well, I find what you're always coming back to is the big picture. What is it about problem solving? What is it about identifying core aspects of any given question or system that we are looking at, no matter what field it's in, that allows you to be able to connect the dots from point A to point B to point C to some application, or being able to make a recommendation. And so I don't really know how I got there. But that's just, I think I just had a lot of different opportunities along the way. And I just, as things came up that interested me, I just kind of went for it and tried them out. And through trying things out, I learned more about what I liked and what I maybe didn't want to do. And I mean, what I'm doing today, if you told me 15 years ago, that's what I would be doing, I would say no way. But it turns out I really like it. I feel like I'm rambling and not answering the question, but.
I mean, I think that one of the things that you're saying is something that I've heard kind of consistently across our sessions. You know, we start out with our own interests and goals and of ideas of where our path will go. And it's important to recognize how that changes based on the experiences you have. And most of us, I think, will say that we've currently, I'm not going to say ended up because none of us are at the end of our career paths, but we're currently in a spot where we probably didn't think we would ever be when we were in middle or high school. And so that openness to opportunity and figuring things out, I think is an important lesson to be aware of that I certainly maybe heard when I was younger, but it's something also that I feel like you do have to kind of just go through.
Yeah, and I think, I guess to get back to part of your initial question too, which is about how did I get interested in statistics and what I do now, is I think learning and relearning as I went through my education and my life that that you're not set, that the things that you're doing might be part of the path you're going to be on, but things you think you're good at or things you think you're not good at can also change. You just kind of have to be open to it. And maybe if you thought, I went through a large part of my childhood thinking math was cool and I was great at it. And then somewhere along the way, I lost that and I decided I was bad at it. I don't know, someone told me once I was bad at it, probably in middle school or something. And I just kind of was like, okay, that's not a thing I'm going to do. And then somewhere, I would say probably after undergraduate, when I was in grad school, I actually figured out, no, I can do these things. I can even teach them to myself. And maybe I can do it in a way that I like and that's interesting. And I think that's kind of where I maybe refound the idea of statistics doesn't have to be this thing that I avoid. I didn't take stats in undergrad. I didn't take it on purpose. I had to learn it in graduate school. And then at that point, I kind of relearned, like, this isn't set in stone. I can be good at this. I can learn it and I can teach it to other people and use it to solve problems and do things that are really cool. And it just kind of took discovering that, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So let's take that to you, Lynn, and think about, you might have, the college students that I know that Heather and Sarah work with are probably their own set of different various species in their engagement, but you actually do work with different species and you have different colleagues there. So while you probably have some similar experiences in the research sector and working with that, tell us a little bit what it's like working as a research scientist, not in an education institution or in an informal education institution.
Yeah, so I do teach a college course to local area Chicago schools. I teach marine biology, and we take them in a normal year. We take them on that boat in the Bahamas so that they can do a field component of the course. So I do a little bit of teaching at the college level that way. But otherwise, a big part of our job is helping promote the Aquarium's mission, which is to inspire curiosity, compassion, and conservation for the underwater world. So this is actually part of my job, doing this right now, which is something that I love. I also get to talk to people of all ages when they just have questions about what are we doing, or what type of technologies do you use underwater? How do you keep pieces of gear working when you're scuba diving at 100 feet? So that part's really fun. And then a big part of it is trying to figure out how to convey our message. So one thing I struggle with is here in Chicago is getting people excited and understanding why they should care about what's happening in the Caribbean, even though they might not ever go to the Caribbean or see it. So it's a lot of communicating and storytelling, which is added to it. And we do have here at SHUD, we have in our conservation research program, we have freshwater folks who work on everything from urban rivers, so rivers through downtown Chicago, species that migrate in the Great Lakes, to amphibians. And they do a lot of action days with people in Chicago, getting them to help us restore our wetlands or do trash pickups on the beach, and also just explaining why it would be a good idea to reduce your plastic consumption and what are some fun alternatives that you can use, or other ways you can recycle or upcycle things. And then the marine team, my boss studies sharks, another person studies corals, and another one of my workers does conch and lobster. And then our leader of the whole thing does iguanas in the Bahamas, which are terrestrial creatures, but they're incredibly endangered and endemic to the Bahamas. So lots of storytelling going on between all of us. And then we're also free to look to work on other things. So I am also currently working on tunas in the Atlantic Ocean to study their growth. And that was a kind of a two-factor thing. They were going to fund me for a while, which is always fantastic to bring in some extra money to your job. But then I got a really fun data set to play with because the work that I'm doing in the Caribbean, I'm collecting my own data set kind of from scratch, which means for all the fun statistical stuff, you have to wait a while to get into that. And so this tuna data is a tagging program in the entirety of the Atlantic Ocean that's been going on for many years. So lots of fun questions that I can ask and things to keep me busy on my computer in the meantime.
You can tell this is a conversation amongst research scientists because everybody kind of lit up at the idea of fun data to work with, right? We all like that. So let's dive into some of the things that we could be directing in terms of like advice for youth that might be interested in these fields, including things like experiences or challenges that have been faced. But before we do, we'll take a quick mental break maybe and say, what is your favorite animal from one of our student questions? Who wants to pose that one? I mean, I feel like I might know what Lynn's is from a research subject, but Heather, you go first.
My favorite animal is the octopus. I love all things cephalopods. So cephalopod is the group of octopus, cuttlefish, squid, and nautilus. This is my little nautilus necklace I'm wearing today. And I was really lucky a couple years ago to get to work at the Marine Biological Labs in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And I got to spend a summer studying squid and octopus. And the squid were really hard to work with, and the octopus was wonderful. So octopus is currently my favorite animal. Also, I highly recommend the Netflix documentary, My Octopus Teacher. It's really fascinating and fun, and it's not made by a scientist, but there's lots of good science in it. So that's my pitch for the octopus.
All right, Sarah, what about you? Favorite animal?
Can I share my screen real quick? Because I'm going
Yes, you should be able to.
Probably no one will know what it is, unless you spent time in Arizona. This is the kangaroo rat. This is Miriam's kangaroo rat. This is my hand. I did research on this for a long time in my graduate school, and all sorts of other kangaroo rats and pocket mice. They're adorable. They hop around on these giant feet that they have. These long tails help balance them and protect them from predators. And they've got big cheek pouches like a hamster. So when you trap them with in boxes full of seed, they stuff their cheeks so they're like sticking out. And they're very gentle creatures. They're easy to hold. They kind of hang out. And when you let them go, they sort of hop in circles around you for a while before they hop back to their burrows, which are also these really amazing piles of dirt with multiple entrances and complicated tunnels inside. They're very cool. They live all across the Western US. Different species of kangaroo rats occur there. Some are even bigger than this. And so if you spend any time out west or in the desert, if you drive at night, you will see them bouncing across the road like giant pieces of popcorn.
All right, Lynn, let's see if I was right on what your favorite animal is.
So I do. Nassau Grouper is one of my absolute favorite animals. A close second though, and I don't have a picture of it, but I encourage everyone to Google it, is the Mandarin fish. They're found over in the Pacific Ocean, and they just have very flamboyant colors. And when I've seen them in the wild, they live in like the muck, so like muddy, silty covered rocks, and they're just every color of the rainbow. And they come out, and got to see some of their courtship behaviors. I just liked how flamboyant they were, and they weren't, they must not have many predators because it was very obvious to see them on these muddy brown rocks.
Very cool. Always fun to learn what some of the favorite animals are and how that relates to everyone's work too. So let's talk about those challenges. What is it like being you know, when you're a research scientist or when you're in education or in any aspect of your career, what are some challenges that that you have faced on your career path that other young students, young women, young men that are maybe thinking about pursuing this, that they could learn from your experiences? Kind of a broad question. It really could be almost any challenge that you've experienced, whether it means being a woman in the field, being you know, an entry-level position in the field, and, you know, being a growing expert in your knowledge, anything really. Yeah, Lynn.
So I went to, so I have 2 master's degrees and then a PhD. So I went to 3 graduate school programs, which I didn't intend to do. The first master's degree was meant to be a PhD in fisheries science. And so in my field for the marine science and marine biology and fisheries, you get paired with an advisor. So you only get to go to graduate school if there's somebody who wants to work with you. So it's not just like, do you get into the program? There has to be an advisor who has space in their lab. And typically, so I've always been funded in my graduate program. My field, you don't pay for your degree, they fund you for the research you do. And the first time I went to graduate school, I had always been taught that like teachers are always right, professors are always right. And so it never occurred to me to question what things that my advisor was saying. And we were a horrible, horrible fit to work together. And it resulted in me being miserable for 2 years and not really knowing why I was miserable. So ultimately I left that program. I was able to get a master's degree. The school intervened and helped me out. But it was just learning that when you get a graduate degree, you're also working with this person a lot. And like that personal relationship, just having it be someone you actually can work with for, you know, 2 to 5, 7, whatever, how many years you're there for is really important. And that it's okay if you made the wrong decision to change it up, it'll be so much better for you. And just that your professors and advisors aren't always right. If they're telling you to do things and you're like, I don't think this is right, your gut's probably right.
Well, and I think that we also brought up a good point of knowledge that maybe people don't always realize for getting into, specifically, I've noticed this more in science graduate work, that science graduate work is kind of like applying for an open position. It's not just applying to go to school, it is applying to work within a lab or within a program more specifically. So the process sometimes is a little different based on the field that you go into for graduate school, but that seems to be pretty consistent from my experience, and I'm seeing some agreement there that you kind of are looking for who to work with and what to work with, not so much which school to go to.
I was going to say my statistics program was a different one. There, they admitted you into the program, and then during your like first 2 years, you got to shop for an advisor and a project, but they didn't have to, you don't have to have that advisor immediately. If you do, it probably helps you, but also they just take you as a statistics graduate.
So Heather, Sarah, challenges or?
I think I want to follow up. I think Lynn brought up 2 really important points, which for me were the biggest, not necessarily obstacles, but things I had to figure out, which is the 2 practical things, which is finances and mentorship or support. And I think that's true all the way from everything post high school, maybe even including high school, right? You know, being able to go to college, being able to go to graduate school costs money. You're trying to get to the place you want to be, but sometimes that feels really overwhelming or impossible or difficult. I know for me going to college, like I applied to a lot of places and I found a place that gave me really good scholarships. So I was able to go there. I honestly hadn't even considered grad school as an option at first until I found out that going to graduate school in the sciences, you don't have to pay. That in many cases, it is more like applying to an open position, because in essence, you're going to school, but you're employed like 20 hours a week to do research or to teach, to help teach undergraduate classes or labs. And that's something I didn't realize. Once I realized that, I felt like it opened so many doors for me, and it got me really excited because I was like, even though it doesn't pay very well, I realized it was something I could afford to do, which I had previously assumed like that's just not something I'm going to even be able to do. I didn't have money or a family with a lot of money that was going to be able to help me out. That was a real obstacle. With that said, different graduate schools, of course, that support, both financial and mentoring, is really important too. And so depending on people's personal circumstances, you need to ask those questions. Like Lynn said, don't just assume other people are going to figure it out for you, or that they always have your best interests at heart. You hope they do, but you need to ask those questions. I went to graduate school in a place where the cost of living was very low, and it was able to make it possible for me to stay in graduate school for 6 years and still be able to live the kind of life I wanted to and make choices that I wanted to do, and even buy a house to live in. If I'd gone to graduate school in a really expensive place, my choices and my opportunities may have been a little bit different, because the pay that I was bringing home probably would have been about the same whether I was going to grad school in Utah or in the East Coast. It's not to say it's not doable, but these are things to kind of think about, just realities. So you can make kind of a base living wage in grad school and not have to pay for tuition and stuff, which is awesome. But you want to kind of think about those things. You know, what kind of life do you want to live? What makes you happy? And that person you work with is also a huge, huge part of that. Because even if you get into a place where you can't afford to be, you need to be with someone who works with you. And it's not quitting, and it's not bad if you decide like, this isn't working. It's not working, it's your life. You can change it, and you can still get your education, you can still get where you want to be. I was very fortunate in that through, I think, just dumb luck, I made a really, really good choice in my advisor in grad school. And so I stayed with her the whole time, and she provided a lot of opportunities for me for the next places to be. But those opportunities to work with people and to have them help you be happy and healthy and do the work you want to do and make the next connection so you can get to the next step is really important, because for better or worse, a lot of getting somewhere in science is about who you know and how they can help you, and then how you can kind of achieve those next steps. And so making some good choices early on, or changing those choices, and then as you get more experience, adding, like being very proactive about approaching people and saying like, hi, professor, maybe you don't remember me, but can you help me with this? Or can you help me talk through it? Or just reaching out to people becomes really, really important. Kind of making your own connections and your own support network.
So Heather, I would be curious if there was a challenge you wanted to share, or if, or even beyond that, something that maybe you would still like to accomplish in your career.
First of all, I want to second
the challenge.
Yeah, I want to second everything that Lynn and Sarah said. I agree. Considering mentorship is, picking the right mentor is huge. And I, like Sarah, I think I did go into it. I took some time off between undergraduate and graduate school and worked in labs and made observations. And I think I knew it, went in knowing I was looking for a good mentor, but I also got lucky that I actually got one. I would say an obstacle I've faced and still face sometimes is imposter syndrome. So this feeling of, I'm still the kid, the young one, I don't really know, I don't really have the authority, I think is pervasive, especially for women, especially in male-dominated fields. Biology in general is not bad. Biology is getting better. There's a lot more representation of women in biology, although as you move up higher and higher in the field, it still becomes more male-dominated. And parts of neuroscience are like really male-dominated, especially I did my graduate degree, my PhD, in working on the visual system, and that was super sort of old boys clubby. But you can find space and you can find allies and all of that. And I feel like I have, but I still sometimes am in positions where I, despite the fact that I'm a tenured professor now, that I'm still like, oh, like I have to check in and feel like, no, I really know this stuff. I am the expert in my area. I do know what I'm doing. My opinions are valid. And I think sometimes I'm good at embracing that, but sometimes I'm still sit back and feel like the junior person in the room, even when I'm not. And so I think that's a lifelong challenge to overcome that. And you know, you can be humble and still fill your space, right? I think that's sort of my goal. I would like to remain humble and open-minded and recognize that I'm certainly not always right, but also carry, you know, the expertise I have and the knowledge I have and the confidence into spaces I go, so that I can use it to advance my own ideas, to advance that of other people's, to solve problems, to advocate for other women, to advocate for other people who are struggling, right? If I can carry that confidence and that knowledge with me and not feel like I'm the junior person, I think that helps me, and it helps me help other people too. So that's a continuing challenge.
That's a great challenge though, to turn into the kind of an advice for youth as they enter into an education and career path, to just to own your space. I like the way you put that, to, you know what your strength is, know where you are, and to own that, so that you feel confident when you enter any type of situation. So let's transition that into kind of like your one sentence piece. What's your advice to either your younger self or to a youth today? What would be your piece of advice to somebody who is curious now about science, curious about research, and maybe didn't know that that could be an option? And now that they do, what's the one sentence advice, the most important thing that maybe we haven't said, or maybe we've said it 10 times already, but you really want to nail that one in?
This is so generic and bland, so I kind of want to apologize for it, but keep trying, or don't give up, or persevere, or something like that. And what I mean by that, I'm sorry, I'm going to go more than one sentence, but what I mean by that is in lots of ways, including in looking for and finding opportunities. My first job in a research lab, I got at the end of my first year in college, and I basically went to someone who did neuroscience and said, hey, can I work in your lab? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, oh, that's so cute. You know, you just turned 19, you're a freshman. You know, he had no undergraduates in his lab, and he was just like, you know, but I just was like, but really, but what can I do? Can I just volunteer? I'll just show up and work for free. What can I do? And so he did. He let me show up and work for free. And then I proved that I was competent, and he ended up hiring me at some minimum wage job for a few hours a week or something. But I just sort of kept trying. And honestly, if he had said no, I probably would have gone to somebody else and been like, hi, can I work for you? Right. And I think that, you know, and I was willing to do any work. I was like, just bring me in your lab, I'll do anything. And, you know, and I did do all kinds of weird and menial tasks that nobody else wanted to do. But yeah, I think that kind of just, don't be afraid to ask for opportunities. And when people tell you no, because they will, keep asking.
Good advice. I want to pivot to one of the questions that's in our chat box here as we come to a close today. This question, coming from one of our student classrooms, is, was there ever that one person that you can, like, know in an instant that really helped during, your path as you moved through this? So during some of the challenges that you faced, or just helped you identify, it could be an inspiring person or a person who was just supportive, part of the tribe, or so forth. But is there one person that you can call out to say, this person really influenced where you are today? Let's open that up for anybody who maybe is thinking about that.
I have one right now. It's two people. They both work in my field. They happen to be married to one another. So Dr. Selena Happel and Dr. Scott Happel, who are at Oregon State University, the Fish and Wildlife Program. Selena is actually the department chair, and her husband is one of the faculty members in the department. And I was fortunate enough to meet Scott working on a research project on NASA Grouper, and he's just always been really supportive. encouraged me when I was still in graduate school to apply for the job that I have now, even though they wanted somebody with a postdoc experience, which I didn't have. I was still finishing my PhD. And he was like, what's the worst that can happen? You get experience applying to a job, which you need to do right now. So very encouraging. And then Selena too, talking to them both, they're just always so supportive. And really they both help balance the imposter syndrome that Heather talked about. They just always encourage me that I can do it. And they're like, also when I'm making tough decisions in my career, they remind me that no matter what, I'm gonna make the right choice for myself. And just like, if there's something telling you not to do something, follow your gut and it's the right decision for you. Like to not stress about decisions, which I still stress about day to day. So it's really nice to have people who are so encouraging and reminding me that I've got this, especially from Selena, who I really admire and look up to. She's department chair. She's done amazing things through her career. So it's amazing to have her to be able to talk to.
Yes, definitely.
Mine is kind of similar. It's a professional contact. So my advisor in graduate school, Morgan Ernest, I went to graduate school at Utah State University, but she and her husband, Ethan White, who's also pretty influential for me, are both at University of Florida now in the wildlife program. But it's just, it started out as I applied to work with her because I was interested in animal behavior and ecology, but after being in that program for 6 years, and she was my direct advisor, and Ethan was a member on my committee, they just have provided support that has continued long after I've left that program. I'd say while I was a graduate student, they were just the sort of people who helped both my science, but also recognized my humanity, and were very good about being good role models themselves, but also good about providing the space for people who are learning and working and doing science to also be people, like take vacations, be sick, work through things that are happening, sometimes in your science, but you're reacting to in really personal ways by having imposter syndrome or procrastinating or doing things that are, maybe not actually the best choices, but these are human reactions that we have when things get really hard, and helping encourage me through them instead of just be like, yeah, you're not cut out for this, go. I mean, you hear horror stories. There are unfortunately a lot of not so good work environments or science environments, but there are also a lot of really good ones with people like that. And it's been almost 8 years since I've left that lab, but I still talk to Morgan at least once a year. We hop on Zoom or Skype or something, and we catch up. I can share with her things that I want to celebrate, but also talk to her about things that are really hard in my current job. And the same thing, I wasn't even going to apply for this job. And she and Ethan both kind of gave me the same speech, you won't get the job if you don't apply for it. What's the worst that can happen? Put your best foot forward and don't be the person who takes yourself out of the running for that job or that next experience or whatever. But yeah, they've just been really supportive through both personal and professional hardships or questions. And I always know I can call if I'm struggling with something and want advice, and she'll be willing to listen and help me at least talk through it, even if she doesn't have an answer.
So that I think is a great statement to end on there, Sarah. They don't take yourself out of the running, right? So be your champion and own your space and take advantage of those opportunities. Well, we are unfortunately out of time for today's session, so I wanted to thank you both for joining, and Lynn for hopping in last minute for me to have a third party here. I really appreciate everyone and all of their conversation and all of your advice for young women and young students who might have an interest in engaging more in science research. We know science literacy is so important in today's world, and so I really appreciate all the work that you're doing with the community, with students, and really just supporting those efforts. Please feel free if there are any resources. I know you mentioned a few in the chat box, but if there's anything that you want to share with our attendees, I can include those in a follow-up email. And thank you again so much for joining us, and for all of our attendees for for this and all of our other sessions of Girls STEAM Ahead, thank you for joining the works, and we hope to continue this program in the future and continue to connect and inspire girls in STEM. So thank you, everyone.
Thank
See you next
you.
time.